I don't trust Putin's criminalized counterintelligence because they violate every agreement they ever signed.
Right.
And people's priorities change as the environment changes, both geopolitically, strategically, and internally. When I get the report, I'll send it to you. You'll be able. It's all cited.
Okay. Last thing I want to say is I'm not saying it's correct based on what Jeffrey's saying, but my impression always has been that Russia loves the idea for the Islamic Republic to always be able to always be one step away from having a nuclear weapon, as a way but not actually having it, but being one step away from it, to always be able to threaten the United States, or they're gonna become nuclear, so always to use it as a way as a pressure point. That was their main goal.
So that might have been during the early aughts. Here's the problem with that: how do you enforce that? How do you enforce that with the Mullah regime that is pseudo theologically motivated? There really is no way.
Okay. All right.
We had a comment from Coping in the chat that I'd like to read. The reason is simple. The Islamic Republic is geopolitically an irrational actor and too close to Russia to risk. Also, a regime change will make Iran potentially a perpetual liability.
Yep. Obviously.
So next, we have Armin.
Oh, I have a question for Jeffrey and Gary. If you were right now the Islamic Republic, what would you do? Throw out all morality out the window and think survival only. Survival only. After the massacre that you have committed on the Iranian people, and now, with Trump's military asset all around Iran, and Israel signaling that they're also ready to attack, and the European Union also declaring the IRGC as a terrorist group, and knowing that the Iranian people are ready for another uprising as soon as they get the chance, what would you do right now? What would be the best strategy for survival?
I guess the Mullah regime's best chance for survival would be to get clandestine transfer of nuclear weapons and the means to mass deliver them.
Can they do that right now?
Well, so remember what you had said regarding how the Mullah regime is trying, when they looked at Iraq vis-a-vis North Korea, right? You have two case studies, right? You have Saddam, who was in pursuit of nuclear weapons, along with other types of WMD capability. The mix was different than, say, before Operation, what was it, Desert Fox, and then Desert Storm before that, and North Korea, right? What are the things? We hit Iraq and we didn't hit North Korea. North Korea crossed the asymmetric deterrence threshold defined as possession of ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. Yeah. So, I mean, that's again why they have to go, right? Because they're not going to give that up. They already know they're done, right? There's a very high degree of human certainty. There's a very high degree of probability that the Mullah regime is dead, no matter what. Right.
Okay, but that option doesn't seem to be on the table because of Trump just bombed your major uranium enrichment facility.
Remember when I said it? You're not wrong. Remember when I said there is non-traditional approaches towards obtaining fissile grade material? That's actually also, I talked about silics or exogenous refining your uranium, or just giving you whole turnkey systems. Whether it's nuclear weapons or, more frighteningly, other types of WMDs, say like racially targeted synthetic bioweaponry. That's even worse than nuclear weapons.
How long would that take for you to prepare that if that was
synthetic
right now the
Islamic
Republic? Huh?
Synthetic bioweaponry, like advanced bioweapons, very, very quickly. Deadly. So one of the reasons why we engaged in things like the war on terror, I'll use a case study of this, and this actually kind of ties into why the Mullah regime is such a threat. So right after the terrorist attack of September 11th, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this person. Her name was Afa Siddiqui. So a lot of people, they don't know about her, right? So Afa Siddiqui, sometimes known by her moniker Lady or Dr. Al-Qaeda. And the reason that Afa Siddiqui, well, she was also referred to by the FBI and the CIA as the most dangerous woman in the world. So why? Why did they say that? Afa Siddiqui, not a dumb lady. radical Islamicist, born to radical Muslim fundamentalists in America that were of Pakistani descent. 9/11 kicks off. She got a full ride to MIT for biotech. She drops out of MIT. She goes overseas to Afghanistan with the stated goal of leveraging her skill set to develop racially targeted bioweaponry to target the racial demographics in the West. So we went out and grabbed her. Why is it that Aoife Siddiqui was considered the most dangerous woman in the world? Was it the asymmetric nature of our alternative attack methodology, like bioweaponry? Yeah, partly. It's that it's easily repeatable. And this is like in 2000, early aughts. If you wanted to make a nuclear weapon, you needed a lot of money and big, large infrastructure to produce nuclear weapons. This is not, of course, taking into account things like Silix. With advanced bioweaponry, you just need an average biologist and a bad dream. That becomes even more like dangerous when you enter the world of today, where you have democratized supercomputing, synthetic biology, and mirrored life, and like easily obtainable like genetic sequencers and all that stuff. I actually wrote a report about that in part underwrote the risk assessment for AI being misused to do that. Like I said, the Mullah regime has to go.
Do you think they're doing that right now as we speak, given that that's the most rational thing to do?
Potentially. That's the other thing, though, right? Because it has such a low signature. The time is you may not know.
And what if you have that? What would you do with it to scare the world?
To go into the specifics of how you'd probably employ something like that for obvious reasons.
What China, all the planes China was sending over, could they be contributing to something like that?
That was one of the concerns I and some others sent up the chain.
Add my name to the list, Jeffrey. So actually, you are who's on our list next. Go ahead.
I was going to circle back to the issues regarding terminology and libertarianism and all that. That seems like, that's tabled and gone. So again, the bad part of the good, bad, and ugly. So the good part was Donald very much disrupted the Mullah regime's traditional approach towards obtaining nuclear weapons. And he did so both to save Israel and to save like Iranian people who would have been caught in the crossfire. The bad is that the Mullah regime has any number of alternative means to reconstitute that capability very quickly. You talked about breakout, right? This, like the Russians want to have breakout capability. That's true. That said, because of the operational impact of those technologies going on and on and on, breakout capabilities now measured in maybe a couple days to a week. No longer measured in months. That's why, like, when the Mullah regime is like, well, you cannot kill the technology even if you destroy the facility. Yeah, that's great. That's why we kill the people that want it, because that's the only sustainable, given the operational impact as given those technologies and the inelasticity of the Mullah regime's pursuit of WMDs, the only effective approach towards counterproliferation that I can see is that the regime has to go, whether they're taken out in a strike or if they want to leave, go and leave. Hopefully Donald gives them that choice. Look, mullahs, you have two choices in the next 24 hours. Get the hell out, or I bomb you into oblivion, right? Like, and then, either they pull an Assad and go to like Moscow and then be used as, I don't know what the hell Putin's doing with Assad, or they get obliterated. Either way, the Mullah regime, if the issue is ensuring the Mullah regime does not get nuclear weapons of mass destruction, or the means to mass deliver them, they have to not exist inside Iran. They have to go.
Okay, for the remainder of our list, we have Heidi and Dijal.
Hi, yeah, that's actually, Jeffrey, that's a good point, because I often think nuclear weapons aren't the worst weapons. Biological weapons definitely are, especially with the proliferation for the last, 15 years of the CRISPR-Cas9 technology. That's going on all over the world, which is a little scary. I think it was Shauna that asked about the war fatigue and the mood in the United States. I think it's been at least a decade that both sides have had this fatigue, because there's two things that there was broad agreement on, and this is a time when we're really divided in the United States. But the two things that there was broad agreement on was withdrawal from Afghanistan and better relations with Russia. Both Obama and Trump had that on their campaign platforms. So that doesn't happen too often in the United States. And then I wanted to say regarding parity, again, Jeffrey's right. We have overwhelming superiority in the United States in most areas. The two areas that we really don't is, again, going back to the industrial base. The United States does not have an ability to manufacture things like artillery quickly. Russia has 3 times the manufacturing capacity that Europe and the United States have combined. So that's huge, because you can have all the weapon systems in the world, but you have to make the bombs, you have to make the artillery. And then the one area that I suspect will catch up pretty quick, but the United States does not have hypersonic missiles. And so far, most of the platforms that we were developing have ended up being failures. And there's a new one coming out this year in the spring. So maybe that'll bring us back to parity with Russia. But just to kind of give you an idea as to where we are, yeah, the United States has overwhelming superiority, especially in the air and in most areas. But we do have some weaknesses, and those are the weaknesses.
Jeffrey, do you want to respond to that? Because I think you are the best person.
She's not wrong regarding production of artillery and basic munitions. That's because of the peace dividend and consolidation, all that. There's a reason that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has done what he did. So as far as hypersonics are concerned, I know Putin likes to sit there and talk about, oh, you do not have hypersonics. That's like, what's his name, who habitual line crosser. I love that stupid plane. Putin's hypersonics suck, and they're very much a contemporary version of what we did in the 50s. So, like, we have our hypersonic Kinzhal missile. Hello? So, that's very much just a short-range ballistic missile that's strapped underneath a aircraft and fired horizontally. Also, the way that Putin and Xi define hypersonics is a missile that reaches hypersonic speed, read over Mach 5 in any part of its trajectory. True hypersonic missiles means you are hypersonic in your terminal and approach phase, which they don't have, including the Orishnik.
All right.
Finally, Dijal.
Heidi's right about the industrialization. We have to reindustrialize our nation. It's a vital importance. As far as to get back to the whole isolationist thing. By the way, Shauna, that isocuck description, that's brilliant. I'm going to use that from now on. Thank you. Yeah, when it comes to that attitude, the problem is that there were so many fuck ups in the year, both the Bush and Obama years. You had Iraq was fucked up. You had Libya. You had Obama endorsing the Muslim Brotherhood, throwing Mubarak under the bus. The Iranian deal he tried to do. It's just like everybody was very gun shy, and everybody was like, our government can't do anything right. So what you had was a knee jerk reaction where people just didn't really want to do anything at all, and that's led to its own issues as well. Because again, not all interventions are created equally, and having that kind of black and white thinking can be very dangerous. Trump is very different because he's been called an isolationist, but he really isn't. He's not a neocon, he's not a Wilsonian, but he's also not a paleocon, isolationist, or Buchananite. He's a Jacksonian, or a Jeffersonian even. He's like me. He's a nationalist. He doesn't care much for international institutions. I don't either. We believe we're America first. We don't believe in trying to save the entire world, but there are times where we have to impose our will upon the world. And whether it was Soleimani or bombing the Iranian nuclear sites, that's what you got to do. That's the thing. Like, he colors outside the lines. He's not he doesn't fit inside the traditional, and a lot of people, he's very unpredictable. But I would say that his views are very close to mine as far as that goes. But he's a different breed.
Awesome. All right, thank you, Digital. That was actually very interesting.
Eric, I think he wants to comment here, but we're cutting it off after that. Okay, everybody?
Okay.
Am I on?
Yes,
Hey.
yes.
Yeah, hey, I just, like to go back on America's Constitution or whatever. But I think one thing to help Reza Pahlavi, the prince, we should remember back in the Magna Carta, where we have the king had to get along with the ruling elites. See, now, I'm not suggesting anything of a revolt, but I'm just saying when I'm looking at Iranian politics, I think we need to focus on who is going to be helping King Reza Pahlavi when he comes to power. Who are the oligarchs in here? Are we going to be able to get these industrial people to come in and support the king? See, we all know the history of the Magna Carta and what it's about, but a lot of this stuff, I think we got to be careful of who is going to replace the Ayatollah, these mullahs, when they go down. And it's good to be here. I'll be with you guys, but if you guys can pick up a little bit, I think King Reza Pahlavi, meeting with Trump and asking him questions about, hey, can you help us and stuff? Because one way to appeal to Trump is to ask him for help, And I really think, I really like to know. I mean, Marco Rubio, these guys are a little indeterminate on who they support. But I'll leave you guys there.
So 2 points regarding what you said. So in Iran, we don't have any oligarchs left other than the IRGC, because the IRGC has completely destroyed our private sector. So we don't have a functioning, strong private sector. Anybody that is rich is part of IRGC. Anybody who's like really like big industrial people that are making a lot of money is part of IRGC. So we cannot like we there's no, we have to actually build our private sector from the bottom up once we get rid of the IRGC. That's one point. Another point is regards to Trump. My understanding is that Prince Reza Pahlavi's team and Trump administration are communicating and are in touch with each other, but they cannot make it that the communication public, because the Iranian revolution needs to remain Iranian, and they don't want to give out the image that Prince Reza Pahlavi has been handpicked by the Americans to be the leader of the Iranian people, because he's not. He's been chosen by the Iranian people. But they want to avoid giving that impression that America is choosing Iranian leaders for them. But you, Eric, you wanted to respond to that because I saw you raise your hand.
I was just going to point out with this collapse of your finance people, I mean, I realize how many of them, all this ministry, their deep state and all this ministry stuff that goes on here. You guys got to take more than just the mullahs down, see? And that I didn't realize how serious you guys this problem is. I mean, without some of these, I mean, I just use the term oligarch loosely, I'm just referring to people in positions of power, generally speaking.
Yeah. In Iran, there is no way to be in power unless you're with the IRGC. They have basically made it impossible for anyone else to be in power.
That's going to be a serious change to bring that down.
Yep, and this is why say you have to take more than the mullahs down. This is why the Iranian people in the streets chant "Death to the three corruptions." They say "Mag bar fasid, Mullah chapi mujahid." So this is one of the chants of the Iranian people in the streets. They say "Death to the three corruptions: the mullahs, the leftists, and the MEK."
Okay, thank you, and I'll look forward to being with you guys.
Yeah, Jason in the chat is saying, Armin, speak on the IPP. Yes, if you want to know more about the plan that we have to rebuild Iran, look at Iran Prosperity Project. You could look at the booklet, the emergency plan for the first 100 days. If you look for that, you're going to see the Prince Reza Pahlavi's team plan to rebuild Iran during the transition period. There's a lot of details there. All right.
Armin, you are last. Why don't you close us out?
So, Jeffrey, you're still here because, again, I have another question for Jeffrey, because I have a take and I wanted to see how accurate this is, because I've been thinking like the main threats to the global order that we have right now, that is being backed by America and its global dominance and its military, the main threats against it is China, Russia, the Islamic Republic, and North Korea, right? These are the four main threats. Russia can't even take out Ukraine, so we're kind of okay. Seems like we're okay. Like I'm not saying that we should underestimate them, but they're not going to win, even though they're going to be a threat. I don't think like they're going to be able to win. And once we get rid of the Islamic Republic, then the United States will be able to focus more of its military might on the remaining three, right? Which is going to make it difficult for the remaining three to dominate. Russia is more of a threat to Eastern Europe, even though it is a threat. Always never underestimate your enemy. I understand that. But I don't think they're in any position to defeat the United States. North Korea also seems to just be like, it's not like the Islamic Republic that they want world dominance. They just like let us be evil right here, and we will stop bothering the rest of you. Like, it seems like that's more of a local problem than a global problem. So that just leaves us with mostly with China, right? And again, as much as again, I don't want to underestimate China, but to me, it seems like China is going to go through a demographic collapse, right, at some point. And also, it seems that they're making the mistake of the Soviet Union, thinking that technology and science solves everything, but they don't. Like, they're making the mistake because when we had the Soviet Union versus the United States in the Cold War, United States was heavily investing in science and technology. But the reason why American science and technology beat the Soviet science and technology is because the investment in science and technology for the Soviet Union was from the top down, but in the United States it was from the bottom up, meaning that it was private, it was competitive, it was Darwinian. The best models worked because, I mean, I know America was supporting a lot of, like science and technology, but it was a competitive environment, and the entrepreneurial spirit in the United States is much stronger than these other countries. And that's why eventually United States science and technology, like, basically overcame like whatever Soviet Union was doing. And I think that a lot of people in China are impressed by, I don't know, the solar panels and the robots that are coming out of China. But I think that because they don't have a strong private sector, and because their GDP is like too much focus on government spending and export, and not much, and the part of the GDP that is about domestic spending is so small, and that the Chinese people have not been invested on like as much as like the American people. I think the American people are very productive. The Chinese people, China has kept Chinese people poor on purpose to be able to control them, and because it has a unhealthy GDP, because it's too like a healthy GDP is a GDP that is basically balanced among all four, right? A GDP is like a GDP of a country is exports, is government spending, is domestic consumption, and then it's the what is the other one? Oh, government is investments, basically business investments, right? So also the export is exports minus imports, actually the first one that I mentioned, right? And China is so reliant on some of these, and is keeps, because it wants to be able to continue. Heidi, I'm gonna mute you because there's a background noise. Let me just sorry about that. All right, because it tries to be competitive and from in the export market to keep the prices low, it needs to keep the cost of labor low in China, and that's why it doesn't really invest in making the Chinese people rich so that it's competitive when it comes to its export market. And I think that is very unhealthy, and eventually is going to break apart. Even though short-term results when it comes to solar panels and robots might be interesting, it doesn't produce the level of technology that you see from a country that is technology and science is growing because the private sector is strong. And that's why I think, like, to me, this looks like the West is going to win long term. Like, if I'm looking at it, like again, I understand that all of these countries are a threat, and we have to take them seriously. But with the fall of the Islamic Republic and the embarrassing performance of Russia in Ukraine and Chinese demographic collapse and the fact that they're repeating the mistake of the Soviet Union, I am optimistic about the future of the world. Go ahead, tell me why I'm wrong.
You hit about 20 different issues. Right? All right. So you're not wrong in the sense that different actors that comprise the autocratic bloc, or sometimes they're called the CRINC, right? That's just like an acronym I use for it, are focusing on their respective geographic regions and or theaters. True from a conventional perspective, right? So China's focusing on Taiwan, Putin's focusing on Europe, and the Mullah regime's focusing on the Middle East, and the North Koreans are focusing on pissing off South Korea and Japan. There's truth to that. That being said, that doesn't mean they don't coordinate their efforts amongst each other. It's almost like you're framing the overall capability from just traditional, conventional, and strategic warfare fighting indexes. And when it comes from that perspective, that's true. The United States will kick your ass right up between your shoulder blades. Tragically, for the same reason why we got to take down the Mullah regime, the operational impact of global socioeconomic and technological trends, right, and revolutionary technologies, which minimize entrance barriers regarding transaction costs and all this other stuff that I talked about and wrote about, it enables increasing amount of actors asymmetric counters to traditional conventional and strategic warfare fighting indexes, which is exactly why Putin and Xi both adopted things like hybrid warfare. You kind of talked about the structural aspects of the Chinese Communist Party vis-a-vis their economy as well as their demographics. So it's true that the Chinese Communist Party in China itself, because of the negative aspects of the one kid per couple program, definitely has a demographic bomb that's going to hit them, the likes of which is maybe only seconded by what is going to hit Russia. And so that's true. In long-term sustainability, without having things like automation, robots, that's actually why the Chinese Communist Party is investing in robots, to offset the lack of physical or human capita. Actually wrote one of the white papers that underwrote Rubio's Made in China 2025 report. This is 10 years ago. If you want to, one of these days, I'll let you read that. Here's the problem with that. It definitely undermines the ability of the Chinese Communist Party from a traditional measurement of comprehensive national power. One of the main indexes in Latin power, which is population. It's also going to incentivize the Chinese Communist Party to engage in an all or nothing gambit and or engage in diversionary war. That's one of the reasons why they'll probably hit Taiwan. So there's that issue. I very much love that you mentioned the net international investment position and, CIG, all it gets a Y. That's true. Again, there's economics. That's the beginning of, that's how traditional economics is looked at. There's a lot of other things that kind of play into how effective you are. I'm very pro free market, Armin. I'm not an ANCAP. The free market isn't good at everything. There are things where you have to have public sector involvement, right? So public, marketing perfection defined as a public need but on a market niche, dynamic learning curve, first mover advantage, provided the public sector can fix the problem, the benefits of the cost is greater than the fix, and the public approach towards fixing it is a net sum positive measured against mixed or private approaches towards fixing it, provided it's an investment in productivity. There's a big difference between, say, sending somebody to school as outdated skill sets so that they can be competitive and increase in the leading sectors in current supplanting K waves, which is a Kondratiev wave. It's based on a Soviet economist who hated socialism and very much wanted to, have the Soviet adopt a capitalist system. He was actually thrown in a gulag in the 50s. Stalin hated him. There's a difference between doing that and say what leftists do, which is I'm going to subsidize your consumption of non-leading core goods and services. Like I'm going to give you EBT to buy beer and potato chips. So all that to say, you're from a traditional analytical perspective, you're not wrong. It's just there's other things that broaden the analysis, particularly as it exists now. AI, robotics, the impact of globalization, which is now delinking, thank God, particularly when it comes to the transition of goods or knowledge, the diffusion of technological knowledge from the core to the periphery, right? So the Chinese Communist Party set up its strategy after Mao died for special economic zones, particularly in China, that had max amount of dual purpose capability between civilian and military capability. right? The reason the Chinese Communist Party did that is because it wanted to exacerbate not only knowledge of the product, knowledge of the process. Yeah. So it's true that the United States has a lot of productivity here. That said, we have to address, because of the impact of those global socioeconomic and technological trends, which exacerbates technical diffusion from the core of the periphery and subsequent change in locus of innovation, there's some things we got to do. So we're in the process of doing that. That's why Donald sat there and said, we're going to do Project Stargate. We're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in AI. Take a guess who played a role now. And we're going to sit there and we're going to, we're going to, organize all the information so that it can be read by machine intelligence. And that way, whoever beats whoever will no longer be dependent upon human capita, only Skynet. That's what we're doing. So is the Chinese Communist Party. Everybody's figured it out, Armin, right? My mom played a role in the peripheral research during the 80s for the Strategic Computing Initiative, which was the sister program to SDI or Star Wars. That was Star Wars's brain. Yes? There's a reason why this is what makes Putin so deadly. He realized something. He said, he who gets strong artificial intelligence first will control the world. Everybody's figured it out. Yes? Everybody's figured it out, Armin. So now we have to win that race, because if you lose that race, it won't matter how efficient your people are. You're not going to outwork a robot.
Yeah. So a couple of points. First of all, when it comes to being local, I was mostly talking about North Korea and Russia's inability to be global. I think China has a global presence and the Islamic Republic has global ambitions, right? But the Islamic Republic hopefully will be out the picture soon, so we don't have to worry about that as much anymore. When it comes to AI and robotics, I completely agree that everybody understood that, and I completely understand that this is going to completely change the game. I understand that. What I was trying to say is that I believe the United States is in the best position to take advantage of this new age of AI and robotics, of this fourth round of the Industrial Revolution. I think, yeah, everybody understood this, and I understand China and Russia also understood this. I just keep believing that free markets and not having a top-down approach into trying to manage all of this is the best way to lean into all of this, right? I think like Putin realizing this and also the CCP realizing this, they're not going to, they're going to be able to, because it's command economy, because it's centralized control over their businesses, they're going to be able to do certain things that is going to look very impressive. And it is very impressive for the short term. But when you have free markets and a democracy, shorter term, you're going to have things that are less impressive, but longer term, you're going to produce better results. It's basically the difference between a family that is living on credit cards and has so much to show, goes on the best trips, eats at the best restaurants, and people think they must be doing something right, and another family that is showing less impressive short-term results, but it's going to outlast you. I think the American model is eventually going to again prove that, just like it worked with any other industrial revolution, the competitive model, the free model, the private sector model has always worked better in every single industrial revolution. And I think with AI and robotics is going to again show that it's superior to the Russian and the Chinese model. That's what I'm betting on. But go on, Jeffrey.
So you're not wrong, again, from a traditional, and I'm not disagreeing with you, Armin. I'm just trying to expand the assessment and tighten the shot group. You're not wrong. Autocracies traditionally are very good at maximizing short-term relative comprehensive national power because they're dictatorial. They have tightened decision cycles, right? They don't have to debate. And representative republics are usually very good at long-term sustainability because they have a more diverse economy. One of the things that undermines autocracies is their disproportional focus on military expenditure, like the Soviet Union, and it came at the cost of investing in civil stuff, right? They traded in an empire of, let's say, silver for one of iron and rust. Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state and the Chinese Communist Party learned from the Soviets' mistake. They do not have socialist economies. They have a state capitalist economy, which is very much the contemporary form of corporate nationalism or the economic element of Italian fascism. That has it's more capable at sustaining itself. Not as much as representative republics, to be sure. That said, when you're in the race we're in right now, it used to be back in the Second World War, we could absorb a first hit and then, because oceans protect us, transform all our stuff and we crush you, right? The infinite game selected for us because the enemy couldn't give us a knockout blow. That is no longer the case, bro. Right? AI, robotics, orbital space dominance, advanced biotechnology, they give every actor, and increasingly smaller actors, knockout blows, which is again why the Mullah regime has to go.
Just one last point, guys, and then we're going to call it. I completely agree that state capitalism is not as limiting and dysfunctional as communism or socialism. However, it's still more limiting compared to proper capitalism, and it's a command economy. And I know you agree with me on that, but it's still dysfunctional compared to a free market capitalism. Okay, before we stop this, I just wanted to ask you, Jeffrey, if you could send me I'm writing an article regarding the popularity. Okay, Francesco, I see your hand as well. But I'm writing an article showing evidence for the popularity of Pahlavi in Iran. I don't know if you have a report on that, because I'm like I already wrote one, but then I realized that I could actually, if you have a report on that, like showing like any signals or signs that would illustrate that, if you do have a report on that, I would like to use it in my article if I do.
I don't. I can sit there and try and bang one out for you, though, when you need it by.
BT is
Well,
driving, but on her behalf, I'll insist that Iron goes off to eat food and take care of himself.
Okay. No, I mean, whenever you can, like, yeah, I mean, I don't know how long it takes. But, okay.